Hello and welcome to the second of Hal's Histories for the Easter holidays, and today we're looking at 1918, the bloody road to victory. And so, as 1918 began, the War of Stalemate was already over. In 1917, the British Army had learnt to break the German trench lines, and at Passchendaele had beaten the German army on the Western Front hollow. At Cambrai, the British had achieved a notable tactical success. Their French allies, however, were war-weary and only slowly recovering from the mutinies of 1917 caused by the bloody failure of the Nivelle offensive. American troops had yet to arrive on the Western Front in any great number. In Italy, the Italian army had been shattered and had ceased to be any kind of credible military force. They would need to be propped up by the British. In the Balkans, Serbia and Romania had been conquered, and in the east the Tsar had gone, and the democratic provisional government that had replaced him had gone too in the October Revolution of the 7th of November 1917. You might say, why the October Revolution on the 7th of November? The Russians use a different calendar. In their calendar it is in October. On the 15th of December 1917, Lenin asked for an armistice with Germany. And so the situation for the Germans was simple. Serbia, Romania and Russia were out of the war. Italy had been beaten and France was exhausted. American troops were on their way, but were not expected in any great number for a long time yet. The British Army had beaten the German forces on the Western Front, but now German forces could be withdrawn from the Eastern Front in huge numbers. Germany in the West had therefore gained a new, confident and experienced army, fresh from its victories over the Russians. The Germans now had 192 divisions in the West, compared to only 156 British and French divisions. After the losses at Passchendaele, those British divisions too were only 3/4 of the size they had been in 1917. At a meeting in Mons on the 11th of November 1917, fatefully a year before the end of the war, the German commander, Ludendorff, decided that they now had a rare opportunity to win the war. To avoid another battle like that at Passchendaele, they would launch a huge offensive, a giant gamble to break the British before the Americans could come. On the 21st of January 1918, the plan was finalised. They would break through on the Arras-Somme sector, get into the open country, flank the British Expeditionary Force and destroy it. They had a number of advantages in this effort. Firstly, the British Army was short of men. Haig could not defend everywhere strongly. He decides that he will hold the north of the line, while holding the Arras-Somme sector, where the Germans will attack, weakly. Now this is the right choice. The Somme area itself is pretty much worthless, but only a short German advance in the north would mean that they reached the coast and risk cutting off the British Expeditionary Force. But it meant that Gough's Fifth Army, along the Somme-Arras sector, had only 12 divisions and 976 heavy guns to protect that area. They would face some 43 divisions, so 12 British against 43 German divisions, and the Germans had 2,508 heavy guns to face the 976 British heavy guns. Now the BEF had learnt well how to attack, but lacked any experience of defensive warfare. They've decided that they will defend in 3 zones: a front zone designed to slow the German army, then a battle zone to halt them, and a rear zone to fall back if it all goes badly wrong. Now, Fifth Army commanders, however, didn't understand this system terribly well, and had put too many men into the front zone, with terrible consequences when the German artillery would start to bombard the British front lines. Also, with a shortage of men, the rear zone had not yet been completed, or in some areas even started, and so the defences are not yet ready. And also, finally, on the day of the attack, a heavy fog would hide the German advance. Worse, in February, 40% of all the British cavalry on the Western Front were taken away from France and sent to Palestine, including all of the Indian cavalry, to fight against the Ottoman Turks. Now, this is in part due to the problems formed in supplying the British Army. There had been a really poor French harvest, caused because of so many men away at the front. But this, combined with the German U-boat campaign, left they were struggling to feed the men, yet alone the horses, and so to try and reduce the strain on food supplies in France, the cavalry were withdrawn and sent to the Middle Eastern theatre, where they were incredibly useful. But this lack of cavalry would be keenly felt when the war became more mobile in 1918. On the 21st of March 1918, the German offensive, Operation Michael, begins. At 4:20 in the morning, the Germans assault through the heavy fog along the Somme. The British lose 38,000 casualties, of whom 21,000 are men who have surrendered, and the Germans managed to knock out or capture 500 guns. In the far south, the Germans clear not only the forward zone but also the battle zone, forcing the British to retreat across the Crozat Canal. But the Germans still failed to reach, despite the spectacular success of the German first day of their attack. The Germans still failed to reach their first day objectives. The losses in guns and the numbers of men surrendering are seen as a sign of collapse. But is it true that the British Army are collapsing in this sector? Well, the diversionary attack the Germans launch in the north, along the River Lys, is bloodily repulsed. There the Germans had attacked with 19 divisions against 14 British divisions and had been badly mauled, suffering 40,000 casualties. The BEF fights stubbornly, with at one stage a stretch of line being held by just 2 sergeants and a Lewis gun, fighting on until the ammunition is exhausted. And so no, the British Army has not collapsed, but it has had a very, very bad day. On the 22nd of March, on the Somme, the British fall back before the Germans. But Ludendorff, the German commander, is anxious that the advance is going far too slowly, although in places they had gained 12 miles. On the 23rd of March, the third day of the attack, the Germans push across the Crozat Canal. But then, critically, Ludendorff changes the plan. Although they are moving in the south and not in the north, instead of flanking the British Expeditionary Force, they will now start to push south further. Remember, the plan was to break through, flank the British Expeditionary Force and drive north. But because the British Army are holding in the north and the Germans are making ground in the south, Ludendorff decides to turn the German army. So instead of trying to make them drive the British into the sea by going north, he decides to push south, to try and push a wedge between the British army and the French army, to separate those two allies, so the British and French armies could no longer cooperate. But crucially, he has abandoned any plan at this stage of driving the British army into the sea. It is going to be a fatal decision.